This lecture will be focusing on the New Deal, particularly the first 100 days of FDR's administration. To start this lecture, we have to start with the election of 1932. In 1932, Republicans are going to nominate the incumbent Herbert Hoover, who couldn't compete with the Great Depression or the legacy of the Bonus Army. He went up against a gentleman named Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was the governor of New York and promised government programs to combat unemployment and poverty. As he said, I pledge myself to a new deal for the American people. If you look at the election results, he was definitely the clear winner. Let's talk about FDR for a minute. FDR came from a wealthy background. He was 6'2", athletic, handsome, and charming. But at the age of 39, he contracted polio. This paralyzed his legs and was said to have humbled him and brought him down to a common level. If you want to talk about what it feels like to lose everything, FDR understood that. He was 51 when he took office. On March 4th, 1933, he said, "Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself." And he's going to introduce, as I said, the New Deal. This is a program designed to alleviate the problems of the Great Depression. He had 3 general goals: relief for the needy, economic recovery, and financial reform. So relief will be immediate. Recovery will be programs that help the nation rebuild, often jobs to create jobs, like a public works programs that will build airports because those airports will then employ people. And financial reform, programs such as the FDIC, Social Security, Gold Standard, those type of programs. So the first 100 days are March 9th through June 16th, 1933. It's a period of intense activity launching more than 15 major pieces of legislation, and it greatly expanded the government's role in the nation's economy. The very first thing he did was on March 5th, he is going to close all the banks to prevent further withdrawals and failures. The next day, Congress will pass the Banking Emergency Relief Act. This was pulled together by Congress in 8 hours and passed in 30 minutes. When you talk about financial reform, very few financial programs have gone through Congress quite so quickly. It authorized the government to invest the country's banks. Those that were sound, thus could pay back debts, could reopen. Those that would not would remain closed until they could. You have to remember, a lot of Americans didn't understand how the banking program worked. They believed that their money sat in a vault waiting for them to go in and take it out. But as you all know, banks use your money to loan out that money to other people. When people pay back their loans with interest, you get a portion of that interest in dividends. So your money is working for you. FDR will go onto the radio and give his fireside chats. His first one is about the reopening of the banks, where he said, "My friends, I'd like to talk to you about the banks." In doing so, first off, he was the first to invite himself into the American people's homes by using a source of media to address the American public. And he did so in a way that was very warm and inviting. "My friends." And he started by simply explaining how the banking system worked. And then he explained the process that the government was going through to reopen the banks. And he spoke in a simple language so that all would understand, but not in a condescending tone so that people would be offended. The next day, when the banks reopened, people were so reassured that they lined up around the block to put their money back in their banks. And he said, if your bank doesn't open tomorrow, that doesn't mean that when your bank opens, it's not sound. We refuse to let any bank reopen until we know that your money will be safe when you put it there. So how do we make sure that that money remains safe? Financial reform. The first thing is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or as I said, FDIC. It insured bank deposits up to $5,000. Today, if you are in an FDIC insured bank, then your bank deposits are insured up to $250,000, which means if that bank goes under, the federal government will pay you back up to $250,000 for each bank account that you have. Also, he established the Securities and Exchange Commission. Though this didn't come during the first 100 days, it was a major piece of financial reform that would allow the federal government to regulate the stock market. He also is going to remove the gold standard. Remember, we talked about the gold standard when we talked about the Gilded Age. By removing the gold standard, we stated that that their money would be controlled by the Federal Reserve. They would control how much money was in circulation, which allowed more money to go into circulation, which allowed for the economy to be able to be stimulated even if it caused inflation. Let's look at some other 100 Days programs. One of those would be to help out farmers, and that's the Agricultural Adjustment Act. We actually paid farmers to produce less in order to raise prices. One of the prime examples is where we gave farmers quotas, and they were supposed to only grow that much, and anything else we actually paid them to destroy it. We paid cattle ranchers money to actually kill cows in order to raise beef prices. Those are all things under the Agricultural Adjustment Act. You have the Civilian Conservation Corps, which employed men ages 18 to 25 doing conservation work. So they built roads, planted trees, prevented soil erosion, and flood control. And you can see a picture of the men working there. You have the PWA, which is the Public Works Administration, building bridges, dams, power plants, and government buildings. Two examples of this is the New York City's Triborough Bridge and the Overseas Highway linking Miami to Key West. Two bridges that are still in existence today that the Public Works Administration helped build. Industry was helped by New Deal programs. You have the National Industrial Recovery Act, which created the PWA and also sought to promote industrial growth by establishing codes of fair practices. You have the National Recovery Administration, which set prices on many products and established standards. It tried to promote recovery by interrupting wage cuts, falling prices, and layoffs. You also have the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority. It renovated 5 existing dams on the Tennessee River and constructed 20 new ones. It provided thousands of jobs, flood control to 7 states, and electricity to poor rural areas. We also have the FHA, the Federal Housing Administration, which could furnish loans for home mortgages and repairs on older homes. This is still in existence today. You still can get an FHA loan from the federal government. And then finally, FARA, the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, which had $5 million in direct relief to the needy. Half the money went to states to provide aid, food, and clothing, and the other half went to states to create jobs for employment. You could go to a FARA office and ask for money, and they would give you a certain amount of cash, depending on your qualifications, in order to do something simple, like go buy food. Our next lecture will be focusing on critics of the New Deal. Some felt that despite the 15 programs in his first 100 days, FDR was not doing enough to help out the needy. Others felt that there was too much government intervention. We'll focus on those critics next time.